Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna, this is Coffee, Books, and Bullet Journals, and today I have some tea to spill. So, I have a very negative video, and I don't do these very often. In fact, in 2018 or like beginning of 2019, I did not do a worst books of 2018 because I was like, I want to maintain positivity on my channel, which is all fine and good and great, and we love that. But I have some books that I need to talk about that I didn't love. So, we're going to talk about some books that did not meet my level of expectation. Now, some of these were just downright bad. They were 1.5 star books, 1 star books. They were just overall, generally, objectively bad books. Some of these other books are not bad books. In fact, at least one, if not two of these books will make other people's best books of 2019. Maybe three of these books. Yeah, I think that I could probably say that 3 of these books will end up on someone's top 10 list of best books, not worst books. So I'm kind of joining my worst books of the year and most disappointing books of the year because I didn't have enough that were like really bad objectively, and then I didn't have enough that I just like was disappointed in. So I'm just putting them together, and I have a rank from 10 to 1. We're gonna talk about it. You probably know what my top 2 are because I have talked about them quite a bit. I have a video called "Reading the Worst Book of the Year." Like, clickbait works for a reason sometimes. So, anyways. Let's talk about this. I know I don't have to, but I'm going to add the disclaimer that this is my opinion, and if these are your favorite books, you are valid, you are seen. I still love you. I just didn't love the book. But like I said, this is like reading is such a subjective art, and books they're an art. Like, it's just like a painting, whereas someone might love it and spend millions of dollars on it. One person might look at it and be like, that's garbage. So like, it's so subjective in how you look at a book and what you glean from it, that one person's favorite book might be someone else's least favorite. So I'm sorry, I love you guys. Anyways, let's move on. Don't hate me. I can see all of the thumbs down or like dislikes on this video already happening. So the number 10 book, which would have been like the least disappointing of this. So like number 1 is going to be the worst book. Number 10 is the least worst book. There we go. Anyways, number 10 is going to be The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris, I believe is the author. I don't have a physical copy of this, so here's the cover. This book, I mean, it was a 3-star book. In fact, a couple of these books were 3-star books. And this was one that was just disappointing to me in the fact that it just wasn't what I wanted it to be, and it was like 230 pages long, so like not very long for a World War II book. If you think about The Nightingale, which is basically a tome, war books need, like, I don't know, not necessarily need to be longer, but like this one was too short. And then at the end, which I listened to this on audio because I was traveling a lot that week and it was a group pick for the Literary Alliance, I had to listen to it on audio. So at the end, when I got to the author's note and it talked about how like this was a real person and they took this story from his life, I was actually even more disappointed in it because I felt like they could have done so much, like the author could have done so much more with this story. It could have been this beautiful love story, and instead we just like, one of the scenes really points out or like stands out in my mind, and I read this in March or April, something like that, so like it's been a while, but the timeline is split between the 2 characters, and so we get this one where the one character is like sees the girl being taken away, and then it immediately switches perspective to the woman, whereas we didn't have any like we didn't get any emotion, or we weren't told how he was feeling, or we didn't see any of that. And so I just feel like that was a book and a story that could have been fleshed out so much more, and probably would have been a 4 or 5 star book. Coming in at number 9 it makes me sad. This wasn't like a bad book, but it definitely suffers from middle book syndrome, and I just felt like the stakes were so low, even though they were so high, if that makes sense. Like, the author just didn't portray it as well. That's going to be Girls of Storm and Shadow by Natasha Neon. Girls of Paper and Fire made my top books of 2018. So I had very high expectations going into this book, and I just talked about it in my November wrap-up. But I've had an arc of that book on my shelf since I got back from BookCon. I stood in line for an hour and a half for that book at BookCon. I skipped out on the Starless Sea arc for this one. I had those two happen at the same time. I knew I was only going to get one, so I chose Girls of Storm and Shadow. I feel like Natasha did a lot of searching on Twitter and Goodreads after the first one, and she took every correction that everyone was saying. Oh, it needs to be this. Oh, it needs to be, we need to have more of this. We need less of this. We need this. We need this. And she put it all in the second book. And so some of the humor was just so over the top and obvious. It didn't flow right. It was weird and clunky. And then, part of the thing that I loved about Girls of Paper and Fire was the castle, was the girls trying to deal with, actually being concubines, and the drama and the mental head games that those girls were going through. That's what I liked about that first book. And this one didn't have any of that. And then I also really didn't like Ren and Leia's relationship in this book. I felt like they were very codependent, which kind of, I don't know, it's a female-female relationship in a YA fantasy, which you don't have. She's kind of groundbreaking things here. You don't see a lot of that in YA fantasy. And so for it to be subpar is just disappointing. Anyways, I still love Natasha. She is a wonderful human being. I follow her on Twitter. She's so sweet and so loving. And I definitely will read the third book. I think that the third one will be really good. This was originally sold, I think, as a trilogy. It was originally pitched as a duology. And then the publishing house wanted a trilogy. So they kind of made this third book, and so I feel like 2 and 3 could have, were all supposed to originally be one book. So that, I think, is the problem with this book, honestly. I will still absolutely read the third one, but it let me down. It took me 2.5 months to read this book. Coming in at number 8, I also don't have a physical copy of, so I'll put a cover up here, but that is Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi. This is a book that I received as an ARC, and I had not read Emergency Contact, and I had heard mixed things about Emergency Contact. And so I went in with pretty low expectations of this book, honestly. And I read it before a lot of other people did, because everyone started talking about it during Contemporary-a-thon, or right around Contemporary-a-thon, and I had read it prior to that. And I ended up giving it 2.5 stars, and it was disappointing at best, but I think it's one of those things that, again, it's a book that just wasn't for me. It was very insta-lovey. So this book is about this boy who is struggling with student loans, and he's broke, and he works in this little bodega, and this child celebrity, think Disney Channel celebrity, comes in, and they end up striking up conversation, and then 2 days later he's on her plane going to California, and it's what? I didn't like it at all. I didn't believe it. The author just didn't sell me on these two characters. I thought that they were so unrelatable in the fact that when they started talking about their two, their problems, because she has problems, he has problems, whatever, we talk about it because we're in a relationship, they don't have a way to relate. So he's talking about something that's completely, she's never had that problem, oh, I can't pay my phone bill. And she's been a childhood, like, millionaire since she was 4. So, like, she doesn't have that problem. And so, like, they were just talking at brick walls. And then she was having problems about, like, I don't know, that her manager wouldn't let her be a singer or wouldn't let her be an actor or something. I don't even remember. You know, obviously he doesn't have that problem. So, like, they can't relate. Sorry. Anyways, I'm sorry. It wasn't for me, but this is the book that I think will land on a lot of people's favorite books. And I'm sorry about that, and I love you, and yes. Again, one of those things that, like, the book just wasn't for me, but it was, I think that for the right target audience, it might work. But I appreciate what she was trying to do with trying to talk about debt and how millennials have to deal with that and things like that. I just feel like it could have done better. Coming in at number 7, I actually think I read this the same week that I read Tattooist of Auschwitz, so that was just a very bad week, so I'll link the vlogs up top over there, I think. And anyways, that was Golden State by Ben H. Winters. This has a very interesting premise. So when I saw it on Book of the Month, I was immediately intrigued. Now, a lot of people did not pick this up as their Book of the Month, which was, like, you know, in hindsight, they probably chose great. But this is kind of a mystery thriller in a dystopian world, which, like, I love dystopian books. They are one of my favorite genres. So this is about a man who can basically tell when people are lying, and in this society, lying is a high crime. So he is part of the speculative service. He gets to go around basically corralling people that lie. Sounds like a great job to me. So this book is 316 pages, and it's a standalone novel, and it tried to do so much world building that we didn't actually get a story. So, like, the plot became very formulaic. It became this, normal, oh, my boss is telling me not to do this, but it's the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it anyway. It's very formulaic. Also, if he has such a problem with lying, but then, like, it physically makes him sick when people are lying. But then he's, like, completely going against his boss's will. It was just weird, and then we introduce this, like, whole nother, like, so this takes place in, like, a dystopian California, and then we introduce, like, this dystopian Las Vegas, and then a person that is supposed to be dead at the very beginning of the book. Like, it is the entire driving force of this main character is that his son, I think it's his brother, is dead, and then you find out something about it at the very end, or like 80% in, where, like, it completely flips the entire thing on its head, and you're like, well, then basically everything prior to this point makes no sense and is pointless, and why did I just spend hours reading it? Then we, like, have this whole introduction of a dystopian Las Vegas, which is also, like, really cool, but then we don't do anything with it. This was a great setup for a first book in a series. And had it been a first book in a series, this would have probably been like a 3.5, 4-star book, and definitely not on this top 10 disappointing books of the year. But it's a standalone, at least according to Goodreads. So it's on my disappointing reads, because, like, I would have picked up the next book. It, like, kind of left on that, oh, it's, we're going to set up this world for the next book. And there's nothing on Goodreads about it. So it's disappointing because we didn't have any follow through. Even if it would have been like I don't know, if we would have just added 100 pages to it and actually resolved some of the stuff, then also would have been great. But not the way it ended, that's for sure. Okay, coming in at number 6, and that is Twice in a Blue Moon by Christina Lauren. I love Christina Lauren books, or at least I like Christina Lauren books. I mean, I think there might have been one that got a 3.5-star book, or a 3.5-star rating last year, but for the most part, they're 4 to 5-star books, and I read The Unhoneymooners, and I loved it, and I had seen some early reviews of this book, and so went in with low expectations because nobody else liked it. Even then, this book was disappointing. So that's saying something. So this is about a girl. It starts out with this, like, prequel where she's 18, she's in London, she is with her grandma, and she meets this other boy, and they end up, like, sleeping together, and then she tells him her deepest secret, that she has not told anybody else about, and that is that she is the daughter of like the biggest movie star in Hollywood that's a big douchebag and like whatever. And then the boy sells that information, and you know, paparazzi come, all this stuff, she's outed, things like that, because she had been able to keep this a secret. Her mom had run away. And then, like 15 years later, I think it was, like she's in her 30s now, and she is a very famous actress, probably in part to the fact that she was outed, and so then they know who her dad is. But regardless, she's a famous actress, and she's like fine with it. I don't know. They're doing a movie with her dad, and it just so happens that the writer of that movie is the boy that sold that information. What a concept. Oh my goodness. What a trope. Yeah. So anyways, there's like the second chance romance. You know, he tries to explain to her why he did it, and she's just like, oh, well, that makes sense. Why didn't you tell me? I would have been fine with it. You should have just told me. It was fine. Like, what? And the other thing was the pacing was so weird, because the prequel like could have been like a couple of chapters, but it ended up being, it was like a third of the book. And so then like after that, it just seemed like it was really rushed. And it was like every single character in this book made very poor decisions. Very poor. Like there was another, like she was playing the lead actress, and then she was like friends with the main actor, and they like had these deep heartfelt conversations, and like he's the biggest sweetheart in the whole world and wanted to be with her, but she's too hung up on the guy that literally sold her secret. What? Christina Lauren, you guys usually do really well. You have some really good books. This was not one of them. As we get farther along into these books, it's going to be a little bit more obvious that I'm getting a little bit more heated. So, we're in the top 5 now. Coming in at number 5 is 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. Now, I read this back in January, so it has been a while. This is a book that I had very high expectations for, because while The Hating Game is not like my favorite book of all times, it's a favorite. It's a 5-star read. It's a very good book. So I had high expectations, because the dialogue in that book is so good. The banter between the two characters, so good. So I really thought that Darcy and Tom were going to have that same kind of banter, and they did not. Darcy was probably one of the most unlikable characters of 2019. Let's just put it that way. And I feel like in a romance book, your main protagonist, your ingenue, should not be unlikable. Like, in certain stories, you can get away with an unlikable main character. In a romance, you cannot. Sorry. Tom deserved better. Darcy was so stereotypical in the, like, tough girl, not like other girls, you know, edgy. It was just, like, And then also she had, like, a existing heart condition that she didn't do anything about, which, like, it's your heart. You should probably do something about that. But no, we're going to use it as a plot device. Yeah, no. So this was a 2.5-star read for me, and it was so boring, and it was just not good. Coming in at number 4 is How to Hack a Heartbreak by Kristen Rockaway. This I received as an e-arc from NetGalley, and I hadn't seen a whole lot of people talk about it, so it wasn't something that like I had any expectations going into it, but it sounded interesting. It was a girl who worked in tech. I really like those books. The Right Swipe was very well done. You know, it was a dating app and things like that, and it was a woman in charge in a tech company, and I kind of like that, and this was a cheap imitation of that. It's not actually an imitation of it, as they came out very, very close together, but it was not good at all. The woman was a very, like, beyond feminist, like we were feminazi kind of thing, to the point where, like, all men are bad, all men are scum, like, you know, even though this guy has, like, he's being a sweetheart, and he's, you know, bringing her lunch and saying all the right things and doing all the right things. He's obviously has other intentions. He just wants to get laid. All men are scum. he has ulterior motives. He probably has a girlfriend, whatever. It was just like, she treated the main like love interest like garbage. Again, romance novels, you kind of have to have a likable main character. It doesn't work if you don't have a likable main character. If you don't care that the two people get together at the end, then what was the point of reading the book? While I agree, there are definitely terrible people, terrible guys in the world, and, you know, maybe the author has a lot of personal experience with it. This book came off very, very preachy and just not good at all. It wasn't good at all. Also, I found it pretty implausible that she put up with this like toxic work environment that was very like chauvinistic and male dominated, and they were just like coming to her and complaining about things. You know, she was at the help desk, and so they were complaining that she was a woman and she couldn't fix things, and that's why they had to keep coming back. She put up with that for years, even though she's a woman with a computer engineering degree. Like, every company wants them. They're trying to diversify. So, like, really? We're not. She was in, like, I'm pretty sure she was in New York City. Like, she could walk across the street and probably find another job. Just saying. Like, it's not that difficult. So instead, you're putting up with this toxic work environment for 4 years, just sitting at a help desk, even though you have an engineering degree. It just wasn't plausible. It wasn't great. So it was a 2-star read. All right. Here's where you guys start throwing pitchforks at me. Coming in at number 3 is Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This was one of my most anticipated books of the second half of the year. And I really, really wanted to love this book. It's a contemporary romance that takes place at a Renaissance fair. Like, that's so perfect! Except it wasn't. It was so bad. And the thing is this is another one of those books that everyone was giving like 4 and 5-star ratings to, and they all loved it. And I thought, well, did I miss something? But no, I didn't. I picked up on some things that maybe other people wouldn't have picked up on. It's personal, like, just because of personal triggers and things like that. So I totally understand why people might love this book, because if they didn't see it that way, then they're not going to have the same problem that I did. But this book was like personally triggering in some ways, and we'll get there. There were a couple of things that I did like about it. I liked the fact that it was at a Renaissance fair. I think that part was very well done. I loved the small town. It had a very like Gilmore Girls vibe to it, so that was great. The relationship between the sisters was great. I think the sister is probably one of the best characters in the book. She was very real, very blunt and honest. And I love that for her. And here's where we go wrong. Because, like, everyone talked about the wooing scene. And the wooing scene was great. But, you know, players can be very romantic and very sweet when they want to be. And I think that's what Simon was. I saw Simon as a player, and I know that a lot of people didn't see him that way, but it like really, really rubbed me the wrong way. Part of the thing was that we didn't see any backstory on Simon until like 50% into the story, so like I had very little time to care about him, because the very first thing, and I knew this was a hate to love. So when I was reading the book, I was doing notes on it, and I got to, you know, the introduction of Simon, and I wrote in my notes about Simon, and I'm like, oh, he's the love interest, but he's a complete asshat. So, like, I don't know, like, if that's my first impression of him, you have to jump a big hurdle for me to agree to this relationship and agree that this is a good idea, and I don't think that the author did that. And then here, the part that I found that I think was kind of triggering is that, and this is why, like, this is what brought it down. You know, it could have been, like, more of a 3-star. And then we got to the point where, like, I saw this as a toxic relationship in the fact that he yelled at her for something, and it was really dumb and stupid. And he, like, was absolutely in the wrong, but he was yelling at her about it. And then she apologized. And then when she, like, you know, when they separated and the, you know, she was like, oh, well, maybe I'll go back to, maybe I'll, if I do this, this, and this, it's, everything will be fine. And, like, her sister was like, no, that's why I love the sister, because she was the voice of reason here. But it was, I don't know, like, I just didn't see him as a good guy. And it was just bad. I thought that this was a toxic relationship. And it was not good. Why? Why was this good, people? I didn't like it. It was a very generous 2-star book for me. And a huge disappointment, because it definitely was. But I was probably, okay, the next 2 books are, like, just bad books. So that would have been the most disappointing book that I read in 2019, because I had such high anticipation for it. And it very much let me down. The next 2 books, I could have flipped a coin, and it would have been the number 1 and number 2 spot. So we're just going to go with it. So it could be either one. So coming in at number 2 is a graphic novel called Commute by Erin Williams. And this was an arc that I received on NetGalley, and I had high expectations for it, because I thought it was going to be like this feminist manifesto and, like, girl power and, supporting each other and stuff like that. But instead, again, we got a lot of, like, hate against men and all men are scum. That was, like, the theme. I don't know. Like, here's the thing, guys. I'm all for feminism. Great. I love that we have more, female power. We don't need to do it at the expense of men, though. We don't need to say that men suck. We can do both. We can have both. Because 2 of the disappointing reads were very, hating against men. But anyways, so this book came across not only, like, hating men, but also pretty homophobic. It talked about anal sex and how that was very demeaning and derogatory and dirty. And cool, if that's what, like, you don't like it, that's fine. Some people do. Some people, like, I don't know. It was very homophobic to me. And then it came across very fatphobic in the fact that she straight up said, like, if she was, at, she was like 5'10" or something like that. So, like, taller than me, at 125 pounds, she was fat and therefore was undesirable. Like, 1 + 1 does not equal 3. It's 125, not fat. And also, fat does not equal not desirable. So, what? It was so bad. I read this book very, very quickly. It was part of my, like, graphic novel weekend. So I'll link that vlog up in the cards. But it was so bad. It was so cringy. Like, if it wasn't something I needed to review, I would not have finished this. I'm very glad I didn't spend my actual money on this, because it was just horrible. The art style was also very, very bad, in the fact that it was just very, like, it was beyond minimalist to the point where it was like a 5-year-old drew it. So it was like the squiggly lines, and I'm sure it was an art style they were going for. So overall, it was so overgeneralized in the fact that, like, we have a couple experiences about men that were bad, and then therefore, like, all men are bad, again. And I appreciate, like, this author, talks about her trauma and her experiences, with rape and bullying and all this other, like, I appreciate the honesty that went into this book. That is why I got the extra half star, and it was only 1.5 star book instead of a 1-star book. But, yeah, it was not good at all. All right, and then coming in at the number 1 worst book of 2019, I called it back in March. It was the book that I read, that I hate read the book, and was, the vlog is entitled Reading the Worst Book of the Year, and that is This Is Where It Is by Marina Camp. This is about a school shooting, and I went into it very recently after a school shooting, so, like, maybe I was in the wrong headspace for it, but this was a book that just did not convey the message that it needed to at all. Again, this book had a really interesting premise. I actually picked it up because there was a Pop Sugar challenge that was read a book that takes place in a day. And this book not only takes place in just one single day, but also in 54 minutes. So from the moment that, I think it's from the moment the gun goes off to the end of the whole thing. I don't even remember at this point because I swear I skimmed the last 100 pages. But this book was just so unbelievable and unrealistic that I was laughing throughout it. I mean, it was so... I've never been in a school shooting. I've never been in a mass shooting. Like, that's never not an experience that I have. But I don't feel like the stakes were anywhere near as high as they should have been. So I feel like the author definitely just pulled her, like, emotion and stories from the news, maybe. I don't believe that they were in a mass shooting. I don't know, could be wrong. I didn't do the research. But there were 4 main characters in this book. I don't know who they were. There was a lesbian relationship for the sake of having a lesbian relationship. They did not mesh well together. They did not do well together. And it was just like, oh, shoot, by the way, here you go. They're girlfriends because we have to have some rep in there. And we didn't call the police for like 30 minutes. But, and let me see if I can find them. Yeah, we had tweets in there. So, like, we were tweeting, I can't believe it, never thought this would happen at our school, was a tweet. Come and get me, I want to go home, I want to go home. We were okay with tweeting, texting, whatever, but we didn't think to, I don't know, call the cops? Like, there's a shooter in an auditorium at a school. What? I don't know. I don't have words. I don't have words for that book. Anyways, I have rambled for far too long, but those were the 10 worst, most disappointing books of 2019. Hope you enjoyed the tea that I spilled today. Come back in a couple of days. I'm going to be doing it on January 2nd. I am going to be doing my top books of 2019, the top 10 books. The reason I didn't do them, the worst books, I'm reading 3 books right now. None of them, while they may not all be 5 stars, they're not going to surpass any of these books. But I am reading a book that may end up on my top 5 or my top 10 books of the year, so I don't want to do that one until the end of the year. But this one I felt like I could go ahead and do. So, hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry if I roasted one of your favorite books. I do apologize. I hope you still love me. Anyways, thank y'all for watching. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button that you can do so down below the video, and all of the links to my other social media will be in the description below if you would like to be my friend on any other platform. Thank y'all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.